Hey beauty, I feel like I say this a lot, but today's topic is controversial and it's not light and necessarily happy. And honestly, this podcast has been on for a year now, and I did not have any desire to talk about these topics. I don't like them, they make me angry. But then, about a few weeks ago, someone brought this up in our WhatsApp chat. We have a WhatsApp chat for the women's group in our church, and she was really upset. And when she said something, I thought to myself, okay, she's really upset about this. Are you just not going to say anything? And so we talked about it a little bit with amongst the ladies in the chat. Ever since then, I feel like I've been looking into things more. There was a period of time in 2020, 2021 where I was looking into a ton of things, and then I feel like God told me to just trust in him, to just lay it down. But I feel like he wants me to start talking about these things, to look into these things more, because these controversial issues are super important. And the reason why I started this podcast is because I want us women to get healthy, to know how to take care of ourselves so that we can serve our families and our communities better. So that's why I'm bringing to you this amazing guest. Her name is Kimberly Overton. She is a registered nurse with a background in critical care. In July of 2021, she founded the 501c3 nonprofit organization Nurse Freedom Network to stand against the medical tyranny we are now facing. She is a graduate of Western Kentucky University and has worked in the healthcare industry for over 26 years, serving in both clinical and administrative roles. Kimberly has a true passion for providing patient-centered care that focuses on empowering individuals through information and education. She has been a strong advocate for autonomy and informed consent throughout her career. Beyond the advocacy, her larger vision for Nurse Freedom Network has always been creating opportunities for nurses to break away from this broken and oppressive sick care system and empower them to cultivate their own environment, one in which both nurses and patients alike will thrive. In 2022, she founded Remnant Nursing, a private membership association focused on keeping people healthy, well, and away from a corrupt system. Kimberly is also the Wednesday host of the popular radio show Nurses Out Loud on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network. I'm excited for you guys to meet her. As I said before, I do this podcast for you, to serve you. So if you want to hear more about these types of topics, or you want to hear other topics, feel free to email me at herholistichealing.com and let me know what you want to hear. With all that being said, let's get into the show. Welcome to Her Holistic Healing. Do you want more energy and less anxiety so that you can do all the things? Are you searching for meal ideas, essential oils, and other holistic treatments? Do you wish you could know which direction to take with your health so that you could finally feel better? Hey, I'm Alexandra. I love Jesus. I'm a wife, mom of 3, and registered nurse with years of experience in clinical research. I also wanted more energy so that I could have more fun and keep up with my growing child. I too was confused about all the different diet and treatment options. I too wanted to wake up every day and feel good, but I felt anxious because I couldn't solve the mystery of my health. Until God showed me that He is the source of true healing. In this podcast, you will learn holistic treatments and Bible truths that will lead you to the peace, joy, and freedom that you have been hoping for. So what do you say we take a break from the mind-numbing humdrum busyness? Let's rest and let God be our healer and helper. Hi, Kimberly. I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
So I know that when we spoke, you wanted to talk a little bit about remnant nursing, but before that, can you just tell me a little bit about your nursing experience up until now and how it led you to where you are now?
Sure, absolutely. So I have been in healthcare for 26 years. I'm a registered nurse. I was a critical care nurse. I worked throughout the pandemic, directly caring for COVID patients. And I ended up leaving the bedside. I started to become uncomfortable with some of the protocols that were being used within the hospital system, specifically the remdesivir, which we know, if you look back to the trials, the Ebola trials back in 2000, I think it was 2015, I can't remember what year. But if you look back to that, you know that 53% of the study participants in those trials died. So we know that this is a medication that has been harmful and oftentimes deadly to patients, and we continue to see it being used in patients already in renal failure when we know it's a drug that's nephrotoxic, meaning it's damaging to the kidneys. And the problem with this is that they were using this drug, which is an antiviral, and they were using it on, say, days 11. Well, at that point, there's no viral replication occurring. So when we're using these medications that rely on viral replication, they're not going to be effective. So I started questioning, why were we using this medication that was clearly doing more harm than good? And not only that, why were we denying our patients access to safe, effective, repurposed therapeutics like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine? I continued to see things occurring in the hospital that in my 26 years in healthcare I'd never seen before, such as intubating patients, not because they were in distress, but because it was an attempt to contain a virus, to protect the healthcare workers. Because once they are on that ventilator, they are then on a closed circuit loop, so that virus is no longer being disseminated into the air. So we were seeing really risky medical interventions being performed on patients that did not need them. So this was, to me, so egregious. I ended up leaving the bedside. I couldn't deal with it anymore. Watching my patients, if, and people don't really like when I say this, but it's as if these patients were systematically murdered. And I could not continue to watch that occur. So I ended up leaving bedside nursing. I started working from home as a telephone triage nurse, and I thought that that would be a good alternative for me. And, for a while it was. But there again, I started to become uncomfortable with protocols that we were being asked to use. For example, they were asking us to recommend vaccination for everyone, including children. But not only that, they were wanting us to tout the vaccines, the COVID vaccines, as safe and effective, period. And we would have no way of knowing that. We had no long-term safety data. So right out of the gate, this was not meeting the standard for informed consent. It was not something I was comfortable doing. So after about a week of them asking me to do that, which I never did, I ended up resigning from my position because I just could no longer go along with this narrative that these vaccines were safe and effective, especially considering going back to my time at the bedside, I had started to see injuries related to the vaccines very, very early on. So the short-term data was alarming, to say the very least. And I could not participate in recommending an experimental vaccine like this to these parents that were concerned for their children, and particularly when children have, or actually the virus itself, a 99.9815% survival rate. And in the absence of safety data, to vaccinate these children was absolutely absurd, and in my opinion should be criminal.
So when you're saying all this, it makes me think, why is it that so much of the media, and I feel like there's two sides, right? There's people that say that you should take the vaccine and that it's effective, it's safe, and then there's this other side. I mean, I don't like to, put one side against the other, but I feel like there's so much conflicting information, and I'm wondering, during when everything was going down, like in 2020 and more in 2021, what was going on in different states? Because I talked to one of my friends in DC. He said that they didn't really have ventilators, but if you talk to nurses in New York, like places like New York, they said that that was part of the protocol. They put people on ventilators right away. And there was someone that I was listening to on some podcast, he was saying that definitely was at first the protocol to put everyone on ventilators. So I guess I'm just curious, like why, like which states were doing this? Why was it so different? Why are we getting so many missed messages? Um, and all that. Do you have anything to say
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can speak to. I was nursing in the state of Tennessee during the pandemic, and it was part of the protocol. Early intubation was what they were pushing for. I couldn't really speak to other states and why it was different, but or it could go to the, and this is just speculation, but it could go back to the reimbursements that you would get at the hospitals. Via the CARES Act and the PrEP Act were different, and they were based upon the Medicare numbers for that particular state. So certain states would get far more money than others. So that may have played a role in it. I couldn't really. That's just speculation. But the ventilators were part of that protocol initially, and it was get everybody on a ventilator early. And what I was seeing, the financial incentives to these hospitals, they were getting to the tune of like where I was in Tennessee, I believe it was $266,000 per hospital admission. They would get money, I believe it was close to $39,000 to put them on a ventilator. They would get more if they were on that same ventilator for 96 hours or more. So we were seeing patients placed on the ventilator and left on a ventilator for a lot longer than we would typically used to seeing. So I don't know about the different states or why it would be different, but it was definitely something that was being pushed. And it seemed to me when you would go into the hospital, this is why I try to always tell people to stay away from the hospitals at all costs, because if you go to the hospital and you test positive for COVID, you then have a bounty on your head. The amount of money that you can receive for that one positive COVID diagnosis, again, can be anywhere from $150,000 to $450,000, again, depending upon where you are in the Medicare reimbursements for that particular state. So it was very disturbing to continue to see this happening, and listen, I've been in healthcare, like I said, 26 years. It is no surprise to me that these hospital systems are placing profits over patients. That is nothing new, but I just never realized that we would get to a point where these types of things were actually murdering patients.
So do you think it was the same thing with remdesivir? Why was
Absolutely.
there such a pushback from they didn't want to prescribe ivermectin and then the whole thing with that other drug,
Hydroxychloroquine. Hmm. Yeah,
hydrochloroquine?
so
Uh-huh.
ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, those drugs are pennies on the dollar. Remdesivir is very, very expensive. It's about $3,000 or more for a typical course, which is 5 days. So it's no surprise to me that they would continue to push this drug because and they were giving bonuses to hospitals that were pushing this drug. They had to stick to these protocols exactly in order to get these reimbursements. So that meant putting them on the remdesivir, placing them on the ventilator. A lot of the hospitals were giving. Some were giving steroids, but at such subtherapeutic doses, it really wasn't helpful. They would not give any vitamins or anything like that. So yeah, we just continue to see them sticking to these NIH protocols that were deadly to these patients. It was, over and over again, what we were seeing was, them coming in, popping positive for COVID, and then it's, remdesivir, ventilator, death, wash, rinse, repeat, over and over again was what I was seeing throughout my time at the bedside, which was about 18 months of the pandemic.
Yeah, I feel the same way whenever someone tells me that they're going to go to the hospital, or I get afraid for them because it's not the safest place to be anymore, right?
No, it's
I'm
not.
I'm wondering when you like right before you quit, were there other people that were seeing things? Like were other people talking about it, or was it really just you who was like saying, "What's going on here? This is crazy."
Yeah, a lot of people were talking about it. A lot of people saw it, but not enough people spoke up. Not enough people were willing to to stand in the gap for these patients and say, listen, I feel like as nurses, we could have put a stop to this. We should have put a stop to this. The moment that they told us that our patients could not have an advocate at their side, the nurses should have stood up en masse and said no more. And we really had an opportunity. I know that there was, I can't remember what state it was, but they shut down mandates, the vaccine mandates, with 11 IT workers taking a stand. Imagine what we could have done if all of the nurses actually stood for autonomy and informed consent and the patient's right to have an advocate at their side. Imagine the difference that we could have made. But unfortunately, fear is a big component. And many of these nurses were coerced into taking a vaccine that they didn't want to begin with. So, and if a nurse isn't going to advocate for themselves, they are definitely not going to be advocating well for their patients.
And regarding the vaccine, what have you seen people that have had really bad side effects? Have you met them and spoken with them? I feel like depending on what news outlet you listen to or who you talk to, I feel like some people have not encountered any of that. So can you speak to some of that?
I can, yeah. So I actually have, and I started, like I said earlier, I had started seeing vaccine injury very early on after the rollouts of the vaccine, which was December of 2020, I believe. Started to see paralysis was something that we were seeing a lot of course, the myocarditis and the cardiac symptoms. We were seeing strokes, we were seeing GI bleeds and, populations we were not normally seeing that. And of course, the blood clots, all of these things were coming in just numbers that I, again, in 26 years had never seen before. And, and Dr. Peter McCullough says this all the time, but, it is the vaccine until proven otherwise. There should have been, and there's been alarming question since the very beginning of the rollout, but nothing has ever triggered any type of investigational review. But I have met many, many people. So I started Nurse Freedom Network, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And I started that back in July of 2021 to take a stand against the unconstitutional vaccine mandates. And in doing so, I host events quite frequently, and I feature speakers who have been vaccine injured. I feature family members who have lost loved ones to the vaccine. I feature also loved ones of those who have lost family members to these deadly protocols. Because unfortunately, the media, you're not hearing these stories in the media. And my goal is to elevate these stories so that more nurses, in particular, who may not be seeing these things if they're not an ICU nurse or, and also as nurses, we do have a tendency to compartmentalize. So sometimes we're just not seeing what's right in front of us. So I think it's important for them to hear from nurses who have been in this unique situation and hear our perspective and the perspective that they're, really not wanting us to see, but we can't ignore it any longer. I've, people like Ernest Ramirez, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He lost his son, his 17-year-old son, just 5 days after his first dose of Pfizer. And that death was directly related to the vaccine. He died of myocarditis. People who are suffering from neurological conditions. It's so varied. We have many of the cardiac symptoms, but we also have neurological, we have stroke, we have a nurse who is suffering from transverse myelitis. And these people's lives have been devastated. They have been financially devastated. They're not able to work. So we try to support them in any way that we can at Nurse Freedom Network. So yes, to answer your question, yes, I have been in contact with and know of many, many hundreds and thousands of vaccine injured around this country. And I think that, to your point, why people might not be in their eyes seeing it, is I think that we have so many that are vaccine injured and they don't even realize that they're vaccine injured. If you think about the increase in cardiac conditions or turbo cancers that we're seeing, many people are just not connecting the dots to the vaccine, and they just think they have an unfortunate medical diagnosis that just happens to be within, so many weeks or months of the COVID vaccine. And they are conditioned, as we all are, to believe that vaccines are safe and effective, period, and that they could never cause any harm. And that's how everybody is conditioned. So nobody ever connects the dots. I've really come to the conclusion, and I will tell you that I didn't come into this fight anti-vax. I was pro-vaccine my entire life in nursing career. I had all of my vaccines. My child had all of his vaccines. But when these rolled out with such little safety information, I had concern. So I wanted to wait. And as I saw them push harder and harder for us to get it, I started to become more aware, if you will. And I'm now really of the firm belief that we are all vaccine injured on some level. If you think about all of the instances of autoimmune conditions, I myself have multiple autoimmune conditions, and it wasn't until recently that I put it together that all of these autoimmune conditions I've suffered from since I was about 19 years old. And that was the same year that I got into healthcare, and I had to take the 3-dose Hep B series in order to do my clinicals and to work. So when you think about the instance of autoimmune conditions, ADHD, autism, food allergies, food intolerances, all of these things that we're conditioned to feel like is just part of life, all of this chronic illness. I mean, I'm not saying it's the case, it's always the case, but you have to ask the question, are we vaccine injured on some level, and we're just not connecting those dots?
So when you were seeing some of these things like paralysis, blood clots, things like that with the COVID vaccine, I'm wondering too, did the doctors around you, the nurses, the other people, did they feel like, did they make the connection, or were they kind of, like you said, since we're so conditioned to not believe that it's the vaccine, did they not see it as well?
Yeah, there was a good mix, I would say. There were some that just weren't seeing it. There were others that were seeing it, but too few, again, were speaking out because they didn't want to lose their job or their license. You know, they were, if you recall, about a year ago, they started talking about the nursing boards, stripping nurses and doctors of their licensure for disinformation or misinformation. But the problem with that is who decides what's misinformation and what's disinformation. So anybody that was speaking out against the accepted narrative was at risk of losing their license. And I've said from the very beginning, they can, if the only way that I can be a nurse and continue to be a nurse is to just abandon all of the ethical principles of nursing, to deny informed consent and autonomy to my patients, then they can have my license. They can absolutely take it. So far, so good. Nobody's come to get it. But, I answer to a higher authority than, the CDC or the FDA or anything like that. So I was never going to put my paycheck above a human life.
Yeah, I love what you're doing, and I love that you actually took a stand, and I want to thank you for that. I also want to go into remnant nursing and some other things that you're doing, but before that, I'm interested because when I heard you on another podcast, I think you started researching other vaccines. I'll just say for me, I feel like it was divine intervention in 2020, before, like, early in January, before the world went crazy. I feel like I went down this research trail of the history of vaccines, what's really going on with them, the true safety and effectiveness. And it blew my mind. And I'm just wondering the things that you found, if you can share some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I started going down this rabbit hole much like you did. This COVID really peeled my eyes wide open. The only education that nurses receive on vaccines is safe, effective, and necessary. That's all. Doctors receive maybe a little more than that. So we're always, honestly, it's a lie that we're sold from the very beginning. And there's no evidence, and this is what people don't understand, there's no evidence linking a decrease in mortality to any vaccine. That we have clean water systems to thank. It's not vaccines. There's zero evidence that it has decreased mortality of any disease. So that's important to remember. But books, a really good book I like to tell people, Turtles All the Way Down, if you're familiar with that, Vaccine Myth and Safety, I believe it's called. Is an incredible book to read. And I do encourage all parents to do their own independent research on these vaccines, on the safety and efficacy of these vaccines. Please do not rely on your pediatrician's to do this for you, because I can tell you again, I've been in this field for a long time. These doctors are not doing their own independent research. I won't say none of them do, but the majority of them do not. They do not have time to do their own independent research because of the way that this system is designed. Pediatricians and family medicine practitioners are all financially incentivized to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars to ensure compliance to the CDC schedule. So it's really important to note that and understand that it is going to be up to you as parents to do the research, do your due diligence, and ensure that this is something that you want for your child. Or if in one thing I found really compelling, again, I had never looked at this stuff before. I'd always, just like everybody else, been conditioned to think that, vaccines were the way. But we start looking at the health outcomes of vaccinated versus unvaccinated children, and that's where it became really, really compelling. So we would look at like the instance of autism, for example. Right now, it's one in every, I believe it's 33 children are on the spectrum. And if you look at that same data among unvaccinated children, the instance of autism is virtually zero, and that's pretty compelling. That's pretty compelling. But again, you look at all of the increase in chronic illness, ADHD, autism, and it begs the question: are these? I think we're up to now 94 doses when we add the COVID vaccine into the schedule. 94 doses for these children. It is not a stretch, and we're jabbing them on day one of life for a disease that's bloodborne that they're not at risk for. So it's not a stretch to say that these could be causing many of these childhood chronic illnesses. And this is the sickest generation of children that we've had in years.
I do believe that the vaccines have something to do with the autism. I know that there are other causes, but I feel like I, I've been hearing more recently how it seems like certain children were fine, and then all of a sudden they just start to regress. And we really need to look at what's going on here, because the children are the future of our nation, and
Yeah.
we need to be taking care of them. I'm wondering what you think about the censorship going on, because in 2019, actually, it's when I was blogging, and then a few of the bloggers were saying that all of a sudden Google changed their algorithm, and now they're basically putting natural health sites way down on their search engine. And I think there were some natural health companies that just lost a ton of hits, and that was back in 2019. So I feel like, and I'm mentioning this because a friend of mine was asking me what I thought about vaccines. And then I started to look through the things that I had researched early in 2020. And some of those things have been taken down. So I feel like in a way it's harder for us to find out the truth. Is that how you feel as well?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The censorship is real. And people will continue to say, we have to be careful because, communism is coming to America. Communism is here. We are literally living under it, if you ask me, because we can't. They control everything. They control the narrative. They control the media. These captured government agencies, big pharma, control and the corporations control everything. They control the government. So that's fascism. And we're seeing this over and over again. And unfortunately, not enough people are standing up and resisting and saying, we're not going to tolerate this any longer. What's really important to know is, like, we have the numbers to right the ship, but people lack the courage. And that's what I hope. And I know many of us in this fight hope to inspire and encourage others, that they have a voice and that they can stand up and resist and say no, because we have the numbers, and we have the power lies with the people, and it always has. We just have to find the courage.
Yeah, I agree. We need to have more courage. What are some good resources they can look into if they want to find out the
Sure.
truth about vaccines?
Yeah, I like Vac Safety. The Vaccine Safety Research Foundation is an excellent resource. Children's Health Defense is also a good resource. That's children'shealthdefense.org. Turtles All the Way Down is something I recommend for all parents to read. You can get that on Amazon. is where I have found it. And that is definitely a good book. I would recommend that for all parents to read that before vaccinating their child. Um, and again, and discuss it with your pediatrician. I personally don't even recommend pediatricians any longer because honestly, the outside of a wellness visit where they're jabbing the babies, we can weigh and measure and track milestones all on our own. We don't need a doctor to do that because really at this point it seems like that's all they're doing is jabbing those babies, um, and we need to put a stop to that.
So let's talk a little bit about Remnant Nursing and Nurse Freedom Network.
Sure. So yeah, again, I started Nurse Freedom Network. I started it out. It really just started as a Facebook group, and it really quickly evolved from there. We started doing some protests at local hospitals that were firing their nurses back in 2021, and started advocating. I was speaking at events across the country, Defeat the Mandates, both DC and LA, and different medical freedom rallies and events across the United States. And but my larger vision beyond the advocacy was always to create opportunities for nurses to be able to break away from a broken and oppressive system. And listen, these problems that we have in this system, they're not anything new, and they definitely predate COVID. We've had problems with safe staffing and with low pay and all of this for decades. These problems have plagued our profession. And I got tired of asking for change and begging for change that's not coming. So I decided that it was really, what I wanted to do was create and cultivate an environment where nurses and patients alike are going to be able to thrive. So alongside of my 501c3 at Nurse Freedom Network, we launched Remnant Nursing, which is a 508c1a private membership association. So we don't answer to the edicts of anyone, no hospital, no insurance company. It's a cash basis only. We take, obviously credit cards and all of that, but we do not take insurance at all, unfortunately, because we can't. That they unfortunately will dictate the care that is provided. So it's private membership association. It's $30 a month to join the or $300 for the year. You get a little discount rate if you do the annual membership. But we have an incredible team of nurses that are working with patients and working to keep them healthy, keep them well, and away from a corrupt sick care system. We want to keep them out of the hospitals. More and more, I believe that patients are starting to realize that they are safer at home with a nurse if they were to get sick than they are going to the hospital. And that's something that we are able to provide. We are doing a lot of virtual work now, but we are also beginning to place nurses in homes as necessary in certain areas. And if it gets to a point where that patient needs to escalate to a hospital, our nurse goes right there with them, and they have an advocate at their side throughout that admission. And there's value in that. As I described earlier, what was happening in the hospitals when you come in there with a COVID diagnosis, for example. But this is something that all of our nurses are trained in functional medicine and more holistic modalities. If you come out like I did, I was very allopathically trained, and I understood that I needed to find a different perspective because I started questioning everything after this. And I wanted to learn how to nurse from a different perspective using more holistic modalities. So we have educational programs for nurses that get them trained in functional medicine and homeopathy, IV fluid hydration, different programs like that. And we also offer micro-franchising opportunities for these healthcare workers, nurses, and others who are interested in these different educational opportunities. They have the chance to earn up to 90% of all their consultations that they do with Remnant Nursing based upon how much education they get holistically.
That's amazing. I feel like this Remnant Nursing, it's kind of the first of its kind, right? Or is there anything else like that out there?
I mean, there are different, I think it's a very unique business model. I will say that there are, different, obviously, holistic and functional medicine things that are popping up. But I really feel like it's unique in that it's creating these opportunities for nurses who are ready to break away from the system. They know that there's a better way, but they're just, they're not ready to, they don't feel like they can or even know that they can do anything, outside of being a hospital employee. And by doing this, we have them come under our PMA. They work under the protections of our PMA. Again, they're able to earn it's a very affordable buy-in, and then they are able to earn up to 90% of everything that we bring in the door. The nurse always gets the lion's share. They're doing all the work. And they get this education, and they can understand that it doesn't have to be the most depressing thing for me about being a nurse, even pre-COVID, when I worked in the ICU, was that 90%, I would say 85 to probably 90% of everything that we saw walk through those ICU doors was completely preventable with lifestyle modification. So being able to actually work with these patients and getting them healthy, getting them well, finding the source of what is causing their autoimmune conditions and eradicating that and watching them thrive is an incredible gift for these nurses. And it's why we all got into nursing to begin with, was to help people, to get people healthy and to provide compassionate care. And that's something that we're able to do outside the system. And I think it's been a wonderful opportunity for patients. It's been a wonderful opportunity for nurses, and then we have different options as well. So for COVID, for example, we have ivermectin, and we are able to ship ivermectin overnight to globally. We have, our PMA is worldwide, so we can ship ivermectin next day around the world. So we have kits that we do for prevention, for early treatment, for long haul, and for vaccine injury. We have programs for first responders who have been vaccine injured, as well as wellness programs for first responders and for pilots. We've worked very closely with U.S. Freedom Flyers, and we offer deeply discounted rates to their members and to members of different first responder groups as well.
That's great. That's really exciting. Did you want to talk about Nurse Freedom Network or any events coming up, or what
Yeah,
else? What else you got?
Yeah, we do have an event coming up. So we host the American Freedom Nurses Summit, which is part of the larger American Health and Freedom Summit. And our next one, we've done about 3 of them so far. The next one is going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's going to be November 3rd through the 5th. And we're really, really excited about this. We have an incredible lineup of speakers. Nurses, Jody O'Malley will be there. We've got Dr. Richard Urso will be there, Dr. Kat Lindley, Dr. John Witcher, Nurse Ashley Grogg will be there. Just so many incredible speakers, but that's November 3rd through the 5th. And if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to wellnessparenting.info for tickets. That's the next one that we've got coming up. And then we do hold these about every, I would say, 3 to 4 months, and we go to different states around the country and trying to, like I said, reach people. We feature vaccine injured, and we feature people who have unfortunately lost loved ones to these deadly protocols. Again, just trying to reach more people and elevate those stories that you're not hearing in the mainstream media.
Yeah, I keep saying this, but I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you do. As we close, is there anything else, any tips, any advice, any last words of wisdom that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, again, I would just impart on people to please use extreme caution. Get yourself healthy, get yourself well. Continual detoxification is going to be the way forward. Even if you're not vaccinated, we have to be concerned about shedding as well. So really, there's no end in sight. And it's not just the vaccines. It's, whether it be the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, we're being attacked from every angle. So the best defense that we have is to get ourselves in optimal immune health. So continual detoxification is so important. That is something that we can help with at Remnant Nursing. I will tell you, if you want to visit us, you can go to remnantnursing.org and learn more about what we do. And I would encourage you to sign up for a membership. You can cancel anytime. We've had 100% positive feedback. People are having a wonderful experience with our nurses, and they're actually getting well, which has been amazing to witness. So again, stay out of the hospital at all costs. Do not test for COVID. You can refuse any medical intervention. Always be aware of that. And our nurses, aside from doing the coaching and all of that and the ivermectin for COVID, we also do advocacy. We are also partnered with, and I think I should mention this, we're partnered with Pure Blood Registry, where we are advocating for people who are looking to procure unvaccinated blood for blood transfusions and planned medical procedures. So we do offer those advocacy services as well. So please feel free to reach out to us through the website at remnantnursing.org, and we are happy to connect with you.
Great. Besides what you mentioned, are there any other websites or Instagram or anything else that you want to share so that they can connect with you?
Yeah. So, and my Substack is a really good one. I'm censored everywhere else, but nursefreedomnetwork.substack.com. You can subscribe for updates. And I should probably just give you my Hype link, because that connects all of our social media for Nurse Freedom Network, which is nursefreedomnetwork.org. But you can go to hype.co/Kimberly_NFN. And that's my Hype link that connects you to all of my social media and all of the websites. And also, I would be remiss to tell you that I am also the Wednesday host on Nurses Out Loud on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network. So that's another thing you can follow, and that is included in that link as well.
I'm so glad that you took the time to listen today. If you liked what you heard, will you leave me a review on Apple Podcasts so that this show can reach more people? And if you want to connect with me, go to herholistichealing.com. Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls.
For you, it's easy and my burden is light.